Hello, this is Rachel from ThinkingAudit. This MindMap considers the use of recorded interviews as part of internal audit working papers. I've focused on this topic following a query I received actually on Twitter. And while it wasn't really on the plan for MindMaps, it really helped me think my way around the topic. So this is the query. I want to clarify that with this MindMap I'm focusing just on assurance and advisory work. I'm excluding any investigations that some internal auditors may undertake. So the first thing that I considered is, what are we referring to when we discuss working papers for internal auditors? And as I said, we're focusing on audit work rather than investigation work. I think for anyone in the UK undertaking an investigation, internal auditors should really be aware and following the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and obviously there will be equivalents to that all around the globe. I had automatically found myself using the word evidence. The IPPF does not use the word evidence really, it refers to information. And the relevant standards are 2310, identifying information, 2330, documenting information, and 2450, overall opinions. And they refer to information being sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful. So I think the question here is an audio file sufficient and reliable audit information? And part of that is up to how your own internal audit practices and internal audit manual set out your working ways. And of course, many of us now use web conferencing and video conferencing tools to hold meetings. So this is going to be a really relevant question going forward as well, because I'm sure more and more of us will be holding meetings where it'd be very easy to record them. So the first thing that I thought about actually was about stakeholders and auditees. Thinking first about auditees, the people that you're working with during an audit. I think most people will be used to auditors turning up with a pen and paper and making notes, or of course these days maybe a tablet. I personally would worry that internal auditors who are trying to build rapport with a business, that a really formal recording of a meeting or a conversation could build barriers to building that rapport, and people may be a little less open with internal auditors because of that. It's also really important to get people's permission to record an interview, and I would hope that no internal auditor would do this covertly anyway as part of an internal audit. And thinking about wider stakeholders, this could be regulators, external auditors, legal counsel, lawyers. Will they consider a simple audio file as sufficient? Primary responsibility for the CAE, the Chief Audit Executive, must be that it's sufficient for their purposes of internal audit. But if you're regularly working with a regulator or a third party, I think it's really important just to find out if they will find that sufficient before finding a problem later on down the line. And then I wanted to think about legislative requirements briefly, albeit I didn't want to get specific into any one country or sets of regulations, but I'd be very careful to understand the laws of the country in which you're working and to make sure you're fully aware of any law or regulation around making and keeping recordings. Given that the audio would be part of your working papers, it may need to be referred to in future by someone undertaking quality control of your work, maybe someone undertaking a quality assessment of the internal audit function, or potentially even a lawyer. Therefore, to be reliable, you need to make sure this is a legal recording, and that means that the person being recorded knew that the meeting was being recorded and gave their consent. The practicality of using audio files as internal audit working papers could present various challenges. The query I received implied that meetings were recorded and that file saved as a working paper, but it's not transcribed. So if that meeting's, say, an hour long, that provides a couple of challenges for time. One, for that internal auditor to then go back through that meeting and to capture the management assertions, the control information. So in effect, having to listen to that meeting at least once more, maybe twice. And also, how do you undertake quality control or supervisory review of an audio working paper? I think it all could be quite time consuming at a time when internal auditors are trying hard not just to be more effective, but also more efficient. And I also think there are practicalities of securing access to these audio files to ensure they're saved where only internal auditors can access them, but to be able to cross-reference properly to the rest of your working paper. And if you're using an automated audit management system, are you able to upload audio files, in particular what potentially could be quite large audio files? Usually an internal audit working paper recording a meeting would make a clear note of the time, date, location, purpose of the meeting and the attendees. That would need to be included at the start of the meeting for the audio record, but I think anyone participating in that conversation would have to introduce themselves for the recording to help a future listener identify the voices. And lastly, I personally would worry that using audio recordings could potentially lead to over-reliance on testimonial information. I've seen various audit teams use what I call chat-based auditing. They've used it too much, and they don't always seek enough documentary, analytical, testing or observational evidence to support the assertions made by their interviewees or to support the information that they've identified during those audit conversations. So drawing my conclusions, I found this a challenging question, especially because we are in an age where we rely increasingly on technology. In the future, it may be that audit teams use bots to transcribe their audit meetings, and these will need little time, cost or human intervention to produce a quality transcription. I mean, you can already send an audio file over the internet and in less than 24 hours get a pretty good transcription back. Not ideal for internal audit working papers, which will need to be more confidential, but the facilities exist already. It is up to the Chief Audit Executive to determine what constitutes sufficient, reliable, relevant and useful information for his or her audit team, and to ensure that the team has the guidance and tools to deliver it consistently. The CAE also, of course, need to make sure it's legal. I think we will see more teams considering this, but personally to date, I have not seen a team that relies solely on audio recording as a way of capturing a working paper relating to a meeting. And I think there's a risk of formalising interviews and meetings in such a way that internal audit could risk raising barriers and damaging its reputation with the business. I suspect this would be more acceptable in some regulated industries, but I would personally find this a barrier to building and maintaining rapport with the auditees. 3 areas that the CAE needs to focus on: auditee buy-in, legality, and actually the practicalities and the time taken.